Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today. I appreciate the opportunity to talk about the future of media with this great, well-informed group, and particularly to do it over this medium, to do it in a virtual conference setting, which I think just highlights the way in which media changes that are already happening are increasing our choices, increasing our quality of life, delivering greater benefits to consumers. And as we think about our future, I just think it is extraordinarily bright. And I'm so pleased to be a part of this industry and again to have the opportunity to talk about the future of media with you today. I'm a regulatory lawyer in Washington, D.C., where I represent a wide range of companies that anything from traditional telecommunications companies, both wired and wireless, to all sorts of new innovators, VoIP providers, e-commerce providers, social network providers, folks that are creating collaboration services, and folks that are doing things, all sorts of new and exciting things. And whenever their world intersects with the Federal Communications Commission or state regulatory commissions, that's where I come in. So I bring that particular perspective to this talk today. That is, I see this world through the eyes of a regulatory lawyer and also through the eyes of an internet advocate who is delighted by what the internet has already brought us and committed to making sure that it can continue to be leveraged to improve our choices, our quality of life, our opportunities. We're not the only ones thinking about the future of media. In fact, right now, today, this morning, the House Commerce Committee had its own future of video hearing. They recently had similar hearings on the future of radio. A lot of people are thinking about the future of media, and it's a critical conversation for us as a society and a culture. So even though we're not lawmakers, we of course play a significant role in the future of media. And so I'm looking forward to discussing that future with you today, and let's dive in. Let's start by talking about what we mean by media. Historically, media was newspapers, magazines, television, and radio. These were the means by which we delivered mass communications. And the media was in many ways defined by its delivery medium. We didn't talk about news content, we talked about newspapers. Radio refers to radio frequency, but it also referred to what we heard using radio frequency. That linkage is really falling apart in our modern world. Today we have video, we have audio, we have news, we have commentary, but they are available on a variety of different platforms. For example, broadcast television, cable television, satellite radio, broadcast radio, internet streaming, newspapers, magazines, blogs, Twitter. We have an abundance of content, which is terrific. And we have more and more ways of receiving that content, which is also terrific. When I think about where we are now and where we're going with media, I often think of this through the filter of the way my children interact with media and their expectations about media. My kids, I have twins that are 7, and their expectations, I think, to me at least, are very informative about what media perhaps could aspire to or could become. But they also reveal critical limits on how media can change and how quickly media can change. For example, my kids are terribly frustrated when we're watching television and we can't fast forward through advertisements. They don't understand that we're watching it in real time. They don't understand that you can't seamlessly take media from platform to platform, from television to computer to iPad to iPhone, for example. They expect every screen to be a touchscreen and are frustrated when they don't have the opportunity to interact with the media that they're consuming. All of these expectations, I think, tell us something about how media can evolve and how we might like it to evolve, which is incredibly useful as we think about the future of media. But the fact that that these changes haven't happened yet, I think also demonstrates some of the constraints on where media can go. So I'd like to highlight the key forces, I think, that will shape our media future. Of course, content owners and creators, distribution channels, technology, consumers, law, and regulation. All of these forces will be critical to the shape of our media future. And again, because I come to this arena as a regulatory lawyer and an internet advocate, I kind of look at these problems, what are we going to see in the future of media, through that lens. And so for me, I think it's most helpful to speak in concrete examples. And so we're going to walk through two examples of legal regimes that are absolutely critical to our media future and talk about how they shape our media now and how they place limits on change, as well as how they interact with some of the other forces that I've laid out here, because those interactions, which are difficult to predict, also are going to be critical to shaping our media future. The first example is copyright. Copyright is a mature legal regime. It has been around since the advent of the printing press. And at its core, copyright allows copyright holders to limit content distribution. And it does this because we, as a society, value the promotion of new works, wish to promote that, and also wish to reward and incentivize creators to create more works. But where the line and what the limits on those rights are, of course, matters significantly to us as a people, as a culture, because it limits how we can consume this wonderful content that is out there. So this legal regime balances a bunch of competing values, a bunch of competing rights, and how that balance works out deeply affects how we can enjoy media, what freedoms we have, what limits there are. So copyright holders today already use copyright law to limit content distribution. So one reason that my twins are frustrated that they can't enjoy all media everywhere is that not every copyright holder feels like that's the best way to share or distribute their content. And we've seen this in a few models. Many of you may have seen this recent oatmeal cartoon, which dramatized the frustration of a consumer who wanted to watch Game of Thrones, an HBO series that's gotten some terrific reviews, but that's available only to HBO subscribers. This consumer in the cartoon, he goes to look for the DVD, he goes to look to find it online, he goes to HBO's website, he's trying to find a legal way to access this content. He can't. HBO has found that it prefers the model where you are an HBO subscriber to access this content. The NFL has created its own channel and has moved a number of football games every year onto its channel. Again, it's exploring new ways to distribute its content in order to maximize revenue, and that shapes how we can enjoy media going forward. What does this mean for our future? Well, the NFL network may grow. HBO may continue to sort of use content to drive people to its distribution platform. I expect that we're going to see increased partnerships or integration between content providers and platform distribution providers. There's been some talk about Netflix, for example, partnering with the cable industry. This is a very interesting development that could affect how we enjoy media that, now we've come to expect to see certain things on Netflix streaming. Maybe that will get tied to cable subscribership, or maybe certain premium content will get tied to cable subscribership. It'll be interesting to see how these partnerships and relationships develop and how the distribution industry works with the content industry to try and maximize the revenue that they derive from content. There are a couple of interesting fights on this front right now, in fact. One is about AdHopper, which is a technology that Dish Network has put forward that allows folks to skip advertisements in recorded shows. And the broadcasters argue that this goes beyond the copyright permissions that have been granted to folks like Dish, and worse yet, it could undermine the broadcast or the broadcaster's model because it would undermine their ad revenue. Dish would argue that this is just the next generation of the VCR, and the fact that it automatically skips these ads isn't any different than a consumer automatically skipping that ad. How that fight shapes out may turn in part on the fact that it may be perceived very differently to give this technology to have a distribution channel, including this technology in its offering, versus a consumer buying and CPE and its own distribution that it pays for and using that CPE to manage the content that it's acquiring. Interesting questions, and we will see how they play out. Similar interesting question, again, about the limits of new models of distribution and what happens, where the line between what is legitimate and not legitimate lies, is a service in New York City called Aereo that takes broadcast television and then streams it over the internet. Again, the broadcasters say, look, this exceeds the rights that you have to receive broadcast television over the air. And we would like to see this stop. The Aereo would argue, no, it's permissible under copyright law. We'll see. We'll see if this distribution model is endorsed and allowed. My best guess is that these folks won't succeed, but it's going to be an interesting fight. Another factor that plays in to these debates and our future of media is consumer behavior. Some would say that services like Spotify are actually a reaction to piracy and to the frustration of the record industry trying to limit piracy and having difficulty putting effective limits on piracy. Now, all of a sudden, we've moved to a new revenue model. The Spotify model seems to be gaining a lot of traction to allow consumers to engage in behavior that's not so different from file sharing, but to do it legitimately and allow the content owners to collect revenue. There are, of course, criticisms of this model. One of the chief criticisms is, does it compensate the artists enough? That's an interesting question. I suppose on the other side, there is always the argument that it's better than piracy, and that as distribution models evolve, that compensation level may grow. Again, it'll be interesting to see how that plays out, but it does seem to be gaining a lot of traction. And of course, another is new technology. We talked about AdHopper and the fact that already there's a clash between that technology and whether it is consistent with our legal norms and our legal requirements. Things like Slingbox, Roku, the iPad, and even the DVR all create new questions about where the limit of copyright is and how much can the copyright holder control and how much can we use technology, and where is the line between the permissible use of these technologies and preserving the content owner's rights. And how those questions are resolved as we move ahead and how consumer behavior and technology shapes the decisions of the content owners, all of those are going to be critical to our media future. The next example I'd like to talk about is the FCC's open internet rules, which were a relatively recent development. This is not a mature legal regime in the same way that copyright is. In fact, I think a lot of the interesting questions about this legal regime are how exactly it's going to take shape in the years ahead. Now, of course, these rules are subject to an appellate challenge at the DC Circuit. The date for oral argument on that challenge has not yet been set. But let's move ahead on our discussion, assuming that those rules stay in place, and ask, will this framework meet the key goal, which is to preserve an open internet by adopting basic standards for broadband providers. And the way that the Commission, the FCC, has tried to meet this goal is by setting forth some basic rules of the road: transparency, no blocking, and no unreasonable discrimination. These ideas are broad, they're principles. The details of these ideas, I think, are hard. And what the next few years or even decades hold are going to be seeing how, if these principles can be applied in practice in a way that reaches the goal. Some of the ways in which the details are hard. For example, there are different rules for different networks. Fixed ISPs have a broader no blocking mandate than mobile ISPs. And only fixed ISPs are subject to the no unreasonable discrimination requirement. Let's take a step back for a moment and just talk briefly about what these requirements mean generally. Transparency is a requirement that broadband providers disclose basic information and accurate information about network management practices, network performance, and their commercial terms. No blocking means that fixed ISPs must not block lawful content, applications, services, or non-harmful devices. And mobile ISPs must not block access to lawful websites or applications that compete with the provider's voice or video services. The no unreasonable discrimination requirement means that fixed ISPs must not unreasonably discriminate in transmitting lawful traffic over the service. This is focused in large part on sort of pay-to-play arrangements. These rules apply only in the mass market. They don't apply to wholesale or retail services. And the Commission, they don't apply to sort of what the Commission has called specialized services, things like e-book readers that use the internet to deliver content. Although the Commission has signaled it's going to pay special attention to those arrangements in the years ahead. But as providers look at these rules, there are a lot of things that it's hard to know exactly what behavior is permitted and what behavior is not. This has been a concern that a lot of providers have raised. Well, I think the key question in the years ahead that will shape our media future is, are the tools that the Commission has created in creating these rules going to allow these rules to evolve into creating clear and certain limits? Are they going to, for example, empower consumers through the transparency requirements, or consumer advocates who have been incredibly powerful in this debate, to pay close attention to and police practices by broadband providers? The Commission endorsed enforcement, case-by-case enforcement, as a way to enforce these rules. So will we see decisions that begin to help providers understand what network management practices are permissible and what network management practices are not? Sometimes, historically, we've seen that players in the industry have been able to use legal rules to actually advance their particular business models. Is that a possibility here? Are we going to see that providers are going to be able to use the enforcement process to endorse particular approaches, or perhaps to challenge approaches of competitors? Or rather, are the edge providers going to be empowered by these rules to make sure that their services can ride across the internet without discrimination? I think seeing how these rules are applied, assuming, of course, they survive the appeal, is going to tell us a lot, again, about our media future. So I've talked about a couple of examples just to illustrate the ways in which the various forces that shape our media can interact in unpredictable ways and can alter our expectations and can both expand our choices and limit our choices. I want to move now to talking about what I see ahead, how I see these forces changing our media future, and what I think are the most likely outcomes for media in 2025. First, I think we're going to continue to see the trend that we're already seeing of more content more ways. Content creators are going to have more avenues to make and distribute content. YouTube, for example, allows you to put your act, your diatribe, your song up on the web very easily. And there are any number of similar tools for different kinds of communication, whether it's audio, video, or text. As a result, consumers are going to continue to have more content available, but it can be overwhelming. Even though there's variety and diversity, increasingly we may see an increased role for gatekeepers to help consumers sort through. Some of the same limits we see already are going to remain. We may have less compensation. We may see a limit on the ability to discover quality content. Already we've seen some concerns about whether the migration from traditional journalism has impaired journalistic ethics, and how do you measure the reliability of things that you read outside of the traditional journalism newspaper context. Similarly, there are distinctions between subjective and objective reporting that are eroding. You may have heard of the concerns about, for example, bloggers in the Silicon Valley blogging about companies in which they invest, or soliciting investments from companies in venture capital funds about which they write. And does that call into question the objectivity? Product placement is another example. Paid endorsements in blogs. I think we're going to continue to see a diversity of models. Premium content providers are going to continue to find ways to seek additional revenue. We're going to continue to see innovative new partnerships among content providers and distributors. One interesting development, I think, is that we're going to see old media put to new use. I very much enjoyed listening to some of the new all Spanish language radio stations on my FM dial here in Washington, D.C. I don't think those opportunities were available back when there weren't so many alternatives to broadcast radio. And there are going to be new ways to monetize content and distribution. I think one example that I certainly didn't expect was when Amazon started selling a discounted Kindle if you were willing to get special offers as instead of the standard screensaver. I think we're going to keep seeing new opportunities, new ideas about how to monetize content. And finally, I want to talk about some of the disruptive forces that are going to shape our media future. We've talked a lot about these. New technology and consumer behavior are the ones that we hear about all the time. But, and this may just be my lawyer's bias, but I think another critical force shaping our media future is legal rules. And I think it's sometimes these legal rules, because we recognize property interests in content, for example, because we want to make sure that the internet is open, for example, actually will play a critical role in what choices we have as we move ahead. And that it is this interaction between legal rules that will deeply affect how much innovation and what forms innovation takes in the years ahead. So it may just be my bias as a regulatory lawyer, but even as we get excited about technology and even as we think about what consumers want, I think we also have to think about what the legal norms that we as a society have endorsed mean for our media future, and how can we meet our media goals consistent with those requirements. It's been a pleasure speaking to you, and if you have any questions, please raise your hand. I'll be happy to take them on.